Okay, over for discussion. No council member has in particular asked to speak, but I dare say there are some who would wish to do so. So, councillors, yes, in the front row here, just to kick us off.
Thank you. Philip Waddy, I'm RIBA Council for the Southern Region. We are a creative profession, absolutely we are, but that's no reason to fail to teach the practical skills that are necessary to translate that creativity into tangible built form. I don't believe you can teach somebody who is tone deaf to sing in key. So it's very important as part of our training at the very beginning that we are pushed to assess our creative skills, that we can dream, we can create, we can imagine, and we can communicate our ideas to third parties. That's very important. But we shouldn't spend 5 or 7 years doing just that. We do need that practical training as well. I think Jack Pringle hits the nail on the head. The Integrated Award offers opportunities to advance the practical and business aspects of architecture alongside the creative side of what we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And behind you there?
Elspeth Clements again. A bit more wordy this time. The first thing was Kate said only 7%, or no, sorry, it's in the memo, 7% go on to take part 3. A, I'd question whether this figure is accurate, but B, I think we have to examine whether this is a good or bad thing. As far as I'm concerned, the profession absorbs what it needs to absorb, and if we're sending people who've been through an architectural course out into the world who are familiar with it, I think that should be applauded. Having said that, I also welcome the introduction of more professional education into the taught course, which I think is necessary. And I think the curriculum, this will be obviously an internal structural issue of how this can be integrated. What I do not agree is tying this to practical training. I have a number of reasons for this. The first one is that you are institutionalizing architectural practice. The training element and the experience is going to be under the umbrella of the institution, which is dealing with the taught course. This has a number of problems. The first one is that possibly the institution will want to charge a full 7 years' fees. Now, I was in council when one of the reasons put forward for this analysis was that the fee burden was very, very high. If universities are going to be QAing and going through the whole system necessary to accredit the the training element of the course, they're going to need fees to cover that. The second point on this is the practices. The practices are going to have to be QA'd to meet the conditions of the course, and they may not like this. They may feel, why bother? I don't want my practice examined. And you may find that there is a paucity of companies that are prepared to provide this. The third point on this is recession-proofing. We've just been through a recession where there have been enormous problems in finding practical training. If a course is dependent on this, I find, that there will be failures. Fifth point is flexibility for the students. I have a part 2 going through his part 3 at the moment, who expressed absolute horror of this. He's trained in one school, he's done his year out somewhere else, he's then done his part 2 somewhere else, and now he's doing his part 3 with us. And he felt that this is going to make not a flexible system, but a rigid system. And although points were made about being able to transfer between schools, I think this takes the choice away from the candidate, and I think that might be well, David nods his head. This is the feeling at the moment, certainly of the person taking part 3 in my office. I think probably that's the end of all the points. Yeah. I'm sure plenty of other ones will be raised.
Thank you very much. Well, there's a key question raised there, which David might want to respond to a bit later. Let's have some more councillors We're having a rerun of the earlier discussion.
I just wanted to agree with Elspeth on that last point, that I think if institutes adopt very differing frameworks, then students will feel the need to choose and stick with studying at one institute all the way through, which I think is kind of detrimental to the character of studying architecture that we have at the moment. But I do, in general, support the recommendation.
Thank you.
Student member on council. I believe facilitating universities to still award a first degree is important, as architectural education provides a robust foundation, allowing some to pursue careers with other areas within the creative industry. I think there is a need to clarify what the integrated award does lead to, whether it's registration or simply to another academic title like a master's or a doctorate, as suggested by some of the previous speakers. And furthermore, I do support Elspeth's comments. As a student, I would like to know how funding would stand and will it be available for the full 7 years?
Thank you. Yeah, if you can pass that mic this way. Then I've got John Assail, then I'll come to you, sir.
John Hickey. I'd just like to say that I wholly support the idea of a single gateway course through an integrated award. It to me means a whole holistic approach to the process of learning what we need to learn to be able to engage with architecture, capital A. I do applaud everything that's been said by the three speakers before now, but to me it does lead to a need for a change in the proposal, in that allowing universities to award a first degree in architecture is limiting. In fact, we should be able to allow universities to award whatever degrees in architecture they believe to be appropriate at the right point in time. So I would hope and trust that we can amend the proposition in that way.
Thank you very much. John Assail. No, he's got a mic, that's fine.
Well, how refreshing to hear Kate, who runs a great school of architecture, say that she supports the idea that schools of architecture are there to prepare students to become architects. I was profoundly depressed when I heard Brett Steele, who surely must run the Eton College of Schools of Architecture, assert that schools of architecture make audiences, not architects. Well, maybe that's why we don't employ anybody from the AA at the moment, and why only 10 students actually saw all their hard work produce registration. So I congratulate you, Kate. I support this idea of an integrated course, but I like the idea of having flexibility, and I promote the idea that we should have alternative routes through schools of architecture. This is like a confession. I have a son who's also trained to be an architect, but I have a daughter who's just trained to be a lawyer. And the difference in their routes is profound. Lawyers can study anything they like at first degree, and then go and do what's called a GDL, and then go and do a further qualification, and then work for 2 years non-assessed, which is why I was very pleased to see the word assessed put into the last motion. 2 years non-assessed to become lawyers. Now, I would like to support this proposition, but not at the expense of other alternative routes into the profession. I like the idea that somebody studying interior architecture or engineering could accumulate a certain number of credits to enable them to have the equivalent of, let's say, part 1, to then go off and do postgrad. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please. Right there.
Thank you. Professor Kevin Singh, Head of Birmingham School of Architecture. I also run a practice of 8 people. I think part of this debate has to be what the students are interested in as well. Don't think it's necessarily a kind of top-down situation. There's certainly anecdotal evidence to suggest that students are keen to understand professional practice much earlier in their education. So in our school, for example, we do a work placement in the second year of the BA course, and it's only 2 weeks, and they come back absolutely transformed. Part of it is about managing their expectations. They understand that practice isn't designing, huge sort of iconic buildings every day of the week. They have to find a level of satisfaction in detail, in sort of smaller kind of problem-solving situations. They are actually almost chomping at the bit to learn some of this stuff. And it doesn't have to be dry. I think there's a suggestion that it's kind of boring, or it's it's not as exciting as the kind of design things. So in our school, and I know there are other schools like Leeds, Northumbria, for example, live projects are really important. So students learn about deadlines, clients, working in a team that was kind of mentioned before. So I think it's a little bit like when technology was, going back 10, 20 years maybe. Technology was often hidden at the end of a design project, and it was almost like we were kind of scared to talk about it, or we didn't value it. And I think that's what happens potentially with management practice and law, that there's almost a suggestion that we don't value it because it tends to be at the end. And I think students are actually far more interested in doing it much earlier in the programme.
Thank you very much. Gentleman with the bow tie there, and then Ben Derbyshire, and then Sunam Prasad. Yeah, and you, sir. Yeah, spotted it.
Alistair Robertson. I'm Director of Professional Practice at the Architectural Association at the AA. I think we could do something to improve clarity by calling the 7-year integrated award an award in architectural practice, to differentiate it from a first degree awarded by university. About 15 years ago, I worked with the RIBA and ARB looking at the definition of competence in architecture. And as long as we were working with the word architecture, we went round in smaller and smaller circles, trying to define what architecture was. But as soon as somebody suggested we talk about architectural practice, clarity bloomed.
Thank you. Can we get the mic? Oh, he's got it. Ben.
I broadly support the motion, and I like most of what's been said. I'd just like to correct the proposition that there would be any kind of a problem with practices, especially chartered practices, accepting the notion of education and learning within practice. Speaking for myself, for my own practice, I would certainly endorse the idea of a quality accreditation process by means of which my practice might be able to participate in education and research with students who are learning. I think it would be a very good thing indeed. And I would also like to endorse the idea that such is the credit system within this integrated award, it ought to be possible for the RIBA's membership department to recognise a junior form of architectural practitioners, just like in the medical profession you have junior house doctors. I'd like to see us adopting members at an earlier stage.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. And then Sunam Prasad in the middle here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Walter Menteith, RIBA National Councillor. One of the recurrent issues which seems to be occurring within this debate, and is what precipitated it largely, is the economic cost of education to the students who are going through our schools. And for me, one thing that seems to be missing within this is any recommendations forward on that basis. And what we are in danger of doing is influencing and impacting upon a significant economic sector in this country. That's not only the practices, but it's the educational system. At the moment, it is more economic to go and get a good architectural education elsewhere in Europe. And that puts us in an uncompetitive situation. We need to say something about this as a profession if we are to sustain our educational establishments, to develop and deliver for the practices and our culture the architectural intelligence that we need going forward. Now, it strikes me that what we should be seeking in this recommendation is an additional sentence, which I have sought to try and describe here, that we should be seeking that such an award can be undertaken at a competitive cost to students comparable to other European Union states, to ensure that we as a nation can remain competitive within our political area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not sure that's legal, but Sunam Prasad.
Thank you. Sunand Prasad, I'm past president of the RIBA. First of all, I want to just say congratulations to the president and the RIBA to have the courage to host a council debate in this open forum where, which is unprecedented and amazing. It's somewhat confusing as well, but that's a bit like architecture. You go at one moment from redesigning the world to shaping and crafting one word in a sentence. I want to make 3 points. One is that in supporting this passionately, it's actually an integrated award. Whether it's 7 years or not is another matter again. It's an integrated award. This is the radical step, and it's at the heart of all of today, really. Doing away with parts 1, 2, and 3 with the implied idea that if you fail to proceed from 1 to 2, you have dropped out, or from 2 to 3, you've somehow let anybody down. 70% at least of people who enter architecture don't go on to enter the profession. And they are just as important to us, and that's why the words in the bracket are important. Second point is that schools inculcate values and attitudes, and at that critical age in a person's life, you actually learn what is important and what is less important for yourself. You decide that for yourself. And if you don't include all the things that actually give design traction and make it happen in the real world, then those parts will be simply taken on by other people, which is what's happened. And one of the reasons we are in the situation we are, and lamenting pathetically, and I think we must stop doing this, by the way, our loss of influence and so on and so forth, it's because other people have seen that gap. And I think that education actually has a profound potential role to play in that, along with, of course, learning to learn, learning to think, which it does so brilliantly. And finally, the words in the bracket, I would like to take them away from the brackets and actually to say that a corollary of what we're doing is repositioning architecture as a general degree, as well as mending the whole condition in terms of entry into profession and practice. We would love to see architecture repositioned as a general degree explicitly, so that getting a degree in architecture is a gateway to so many more things. And to pick up what John Assel said about many structures within the 7 years or whatever, how many years, and many ways into the profession and many ways into the architecture, we could also have many ways onwards from your education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, a few hands there. Let's take that one there.
Gordon Gibb, Vice Chair of APSA, a Professional Studies Advisor. I've been involved in teaching professional studies off and on for 25 years. I teach from stage 3, so 3rd year, 4th year, 5th year, 1st year out, part 3, all the way through. I see the people evolve as architectural trainees and ultimately architects in that process. I tend to think that the process works very well. I think it does seem to exclude some people. I think perhaps the biggest issue for me in that is that studio tells exactly the opposite story from the story that professional studies tells. So it's not just about integration. They are telling the students something completely different. And it's very difficult in a school of architecture where professional studies, which is perhaps 1/3 of what an architect needs to know, or maybe more, is 3% of the assessed curriculum. And in some schools of architecture, it's less than that. So no wonder it's a bit of a surprise when the student comes to part 3 and discovers it's all completely different from that. Now, I have to say that I and my other colleagues in APSA, we do fight very hard to make professional studies as relevant as we possibly can in that context, as enjoyable, as engaging, and as relevant to practice. But when you are in an environment where the entire process is seduced by the studio, the students are seduced by studio, and the tutors are also, and the RIBA is also, and they give awards for pictures from studio, and no awards for actually being a good architect, then I would ask you whether allowing integration into a culture where studio completely dominates would not end up in us losing the amount of education in the profession that we now have.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a councillor contribution here. It's all right, the mic's coming this way, from this side.
I just have to say, as a practitioner in private practice, and there's just two of us in our practice at the moment, and you sit there all week long and you've not drawn anything because you've been doing certificates, accounts, etc., this gentleman said, you then have to question, does the studio in that environment, are the schools really preparing us for practice? Yeah, they over-prepare us for the design side of it. The other skills that we need to actually deliver buildings to our clients are seriously overlooked.
Thank you very much. Now, there's a gentleman in the light grey, the little shirt, grey shirt there. Yeah, that one.
Hi, I'm Thomas Brumby. I'm a fourth-year student at the Macintosh School. I just want to ask more a practical question. So, if this recommendation is voted through, what are the means to make sure that all of the ideas that are talked about will be included in, or what's the process for making sure that we don't lose like some of the thoughts that we've heard today?
Okay, we'll come to that in just a moment. We'll take a couple more contributions. Yes, at the back, and then over on the left, just there. Yeah, just there. He's standing up. Okay.
Right, thank you, Paul. Hisham Al-Adi. I'm the Dean of Built Environment at the University of Salford.
Could you just hold it a bit close to the mic?
Well, I have been debating this in the last 8 years, I think. The first, I was a head of school here, and then I moved to Australia as a head of school there to find out the same debate going over there. Interestingly, Australia have already implemented that, and they suffer a lot out of this at the moment, and they're regretting it. Why this? What happened? I totally agree with Kate, and everybody have been debating for this in the last 9 years. I do believe that it's more flexible. I do believe it's better for the profession generally. The problem with that, which I argued for, is that it allows, without the first degree, it allows a change in the understanding of architecture education among the public. Because the word architecture, while it's not protected, it means something to the public. What happened in Australia, that once they dropped the first degree, and I understand there is facilities here, but facilities doesn't mean accredited programs. It allows a flare of programs in architecture across the further education sector. And that very much changed the perception of architecture in Australia. And interestingly, instead of increasing the number, what happened is dropped the number of architecture students in Australia by about 20% in the last 2 years. So there are implications of this. While we agree on the principle, while I believe that it's very important and very strongly supported, the premises of that, but the implication of that can be very dangerous for the profession and the perception of architecture.
Thank you very much. Now, there's someone with the microphone there, I think. And then can you take that other mic over onto the left-hand side there, about halfway down? Yes, please, sir.
Alan Shingler, National Councillor. I have a question, because I sense we will get down to business on the vote soon, in relation to the wording of 7 years. Now, I fully support an integrated approach, but do we need to stipulate 7 years as a period, as a duration?
Okay, thank you. We'll pick that up in a moment. Professor Swennerson.
Okay, for those of you that don't know me, my name's Mark Swennerton. I was recently honoured by becoming a fellow of the RIBA and the Vice President for Education invited me to attend this event. I was very pleased to do so. I was formerly co-editor and founder of Architecture Today magazine. I've just retired as Sterling Professor at Liverpool. And in between those two, I ran the Oxford Brookes School of Architecture, which has Part 1, Part 2 and Part 3, and also delivers the RIBA office-based exams. So I've got fairly wide experience in this area. When I was invited to attend, I looked forward to receiving the report of the committee, or the panel, leading to the recommendations. And I received a kind of 3-page document, and I then replied and said, well, are we going to get the papers? And I was told, well, those are the papers. And I find it extraordinary that the RIBA Council is being asked to approve a set of proposals about architectural education on the basis of such flimsy argument and such flimsy evidence. Normally, one would expect the evidence to be gathered and analysed, and an argument to be produced from that on which the recommendations are based. There's none of that process that I can see in the papers submitted. The evidence collecting is risible. It's on fees, it's a comment by Charles Kennedy. You know, if we're going to choose any MP, let's choose Charles Kennedy as a reliable source on the impact of fees. So that there's a real problem about these recommendations not having arisen in the normal process of analysis leading to recommendations. And my advice generally, if I was to be asked to council, would be that the whole paper should be referred back for reworking. On the particular recommendation we've got at the moment, I don't see that it's possible to vote for this recommendation because the core of it, as we've been told, is this notion of an integrated award. And there are two completely contradictory statements made in the supporting paperwork about what is meant by an integrated award. It's quite clear that in the main memos that we've been sent, what is envisaged is a single award. And that was stated explicitly by Kate Heron, who was a member of the review panel, who said an integrated award is a single named award at the end of the period. So that's what's in the body of the documents. But then we have these footnotes to the documents, which are basically trying to unscramble the confusion and the non-deliverability of what's been proposed in the substantive part of the document. And so in the footnote in footnote 2 on that page, we say the term integrated award does not refer to a single 7-year academic award. So we've got two completely contradictory statements about what this integrated award is. And that's why I don't see how the Council of RIBA can possibly vote for this, because basically if we vote for it, we don't know what we're voting for. Thank you.
Well, I think at this point, on your behalf, I'm going to seek elucidation to answers to that question. I'll ask David Gloucester to say something about that and Rosbar to comment. And can I just add in, I think, one or two other questions that have arisen just for clarity. Firstly, is there any problem about students transferring under an integrated 7-year award programme? Secondly, would they inevitably pay more fees than is currently the case? I mean, taking into account administrative things which may not be included in fees at the moment, but they might be paying in some other way. Thirdly, I think the Honorary Secretary might comment on whether it's possible to have a discussion about what universities charge, which I don't think is within the RIBA's remit. And then this other comment, how do various comments which have pertained to this, but actually about architectural education generally, how might they be taken forward in the next iteration of this process? But perhaps we could start off with the thing about what is meant by an integrated award. Who wants to kick us off?
If I may, just before David comes in, I just want to comment just want to make a response to your comment, Mark, about the paperwork. Of course, you attending here and being presented with these papers, what you're not seeing is the discussions that we have had in council. So this is, the council members are not being asked to make a decision solely on the content of these papers. There's been a presentation to council on at least 2 occasions with updates. And so this is seen as a sort of sequence of conveying of information to council members. So they're not making a decision solely on the isolated instance of these papers. I hope that sort of reassures you, Mark, a little. David.
Yes, just to pick up the point about first awards. Firstly, it's not the RIBA's job to tell universities what they can and can't do in terms of awarding degrees. The expectation would be that schools of architecture would continue to award first degrees for all the very good reasons that have been rehearsed earlier on. In relation to fees, the current funding support for this would be the same. In other words, there would be funding for 5 full-time years of study plus an examination fee. This is exactly the situation that we currently have at the moment. In relation to Walter's point about charging, whilst it would be marvellous to believe that we could reposition the UK so that it was a direct market competitor with the cheapest nation working within the European Union. Sorry? Sorry?
That's not what I said.
Well, okay.
It's about trying to make the UK competitive as an educational institution provider.
Totally understand that, but universities have to set fees within the limits which government attributes to those fees, and that actually there is relatively little latitude within those. The point being that it is not possible in terms of the fee structures which British universities charge to be able to directly match, for example, Denmark, which currently charges nothing to any EU citizen for a higher education. So there are actually statutory issues which control the situation of the UK in terms of the fee charging marketplace, as it were.
And just for a bit more clarity on integration, because to pick up Mark's direct question about what the footnote says and what the motion says.
The notion of integration is the subsuming of all the 3 cycles within an award. What the award is ultimately called, as Kate said, may take a decade for us to agree. But within that, just to reiterate my first point, there remains the facility for universities, if they wish to do so, to award first degrees in architecture.
I'm going to move to a vote. I think councillors have heard enough in the discussion to be able to make their...
Sorry, Katie?
Do you need an amendment? Because it was typically 7 years.
Nobody's proposed an amendment. Or are you proposing an amendment? Alan, are you proposing it? Who is?
Sorry, Steve, I missed the first section. But the question that I asked... I missed the first section, but the question that I asked was, is 7 years, a reference to 7 years, necessary under this motion? I'm concerned about the message that will be given, to the broader group outside of this room, and if there is flexibility within that duration, then maybe the number should be removed.
We are in a position that following the revisions to the Professional Qualifications Directive in autumn 2013, the UK is obliged, as is any other member state affected by the changes to the Qualifications Directive, to adopt a framework. And these frameworks are as we said in Stephen's introduction, the minimum frameworks are 4+2 and 5+. So whatever the proposal is that UK architecture education adopts for the future, it has to comply with those statutory frameworks.
Sorry, Bill, do you want
Thank you. William Smedley, council member. In the first motion, we talked about having a typical 7-year period of time, and I think that's the point that we were discussing here, and that's the point that we wanted to make, that this, if you stay with 7 years, then it is 7 years. Should it be typically 7 years, or can we remove 7?
So, Bill, you want to just insert the word?
Typically.
Okay.
Shall I read it?
Yeah.
Shall I read what I've written following actually the first motion, because I guess somebody might say the same thing. And I've added a few words at the beginning, so it now reads typically a minimum 7-year integrated award, and then everything else is as before.
I think Sunan's right. I don't think
the wording is slightly different. The grammar is slightly different, so this is the way of doing the same thing. It's typically a minimum 7-year integrated award with the facility for universities to still award a first degree in architecture.
Stephen, sorry, it's Alan. Could I suggest an integrated award with the removal of a 7-year?
Sorry.
I think I have to, and I'm being honorary secretary-ish, I think I have to advise that we ought to do something that complies with the European system of doing things. The European system of doing things unfortunately counts the number of years and not the outcomes. We have better outcomes, but we have to frame it in a way of a number of years. And I would urge Council to include that specificity so that we don't have trouble later on with the ARB and with the European Union.
Dominic, can I bring you in?
The awarding body for the integrated award, do you perceive this to be the RIBA?
No.
Just repeat that for everybody.
Body inevitably has to be the universities.
The RIBA...
But is it? Because historically it was the RIBA examination that was then delegated to the universities.
The RIBA's sole role as an education provider resides in its provision of Part 3 through the RIBA Northwest region and through the office-based exam. Those are the only awards that we have education provision awarding powers over. Elsewhere, all awards are the gifts of the universities who host those courses.
Can I clarify that? The RIBA validates and recognises awards made by academic institutions, universities and others.
I'm just thinking of the coordination of this, as you say, it's an integrated award. I go to Oxford Books, I do my first degree there, I want to go somewhere else. There has to be a good system of accreditation in place to ensure that, you know,
that's the validation. It's the validation process.
That's the validation process.
That's the RIBA validation process. Gerard.
I would suggest keeping the, whether it's typically 7 years or the 7 years still within the motion. If you just call it an integrated award, it implies that the first degree is awarded at the end of the award. So I would suggest the motion remains as it's saying, but after it says, with facilities for university, you still award a first degree in architecture and subsequent exit awards, which is adopting Kate's suggestion.
Okay, so Roger, we'll follow the same format as last time. We have an amendment which I would like council members to vote on, and then if council accepts that, that becomes a substantive recommendation.
That's right. This is the motion, as I understand it, as proposed by Katie Wilmot and seconded by Bill Smedley, and it says typically a minimum 7-year integrated award with the facility for universities to still award a first degree in architecture. That's what I read before. And it's... Sorry?
No, there's no minimum.
You don't need minimum. It's changed. It's typically a 7-year integrated award with the facility for universities to still award a first degree in architecture.
Okay. Just if you could just where whilst we.
That's not clear English.
I think that'll do for this purpose. So we add the word typically to the front of that.
Okay, so council members, as before, you have A for yes, B for no, and C for abstain. Can you now vote, please?
There it is.
Okay, so the outcome of that recommendation, 26 people voted, council members voted in favour of the recommendation, 5 against and 2 abstained, and so the recommendation is carried. Thank you.